victim here. That victim, we understand, critically injured at this point. That police chase taking all the way throughout the morning through several parts of Brooklyn, coming to a crashing end here in where we are in Red Hook. You can see an NYPD cruiser. Certainly seems like it boxed in that U-Haul van, which is up on the sidewalk here outside of a building. As I mentioned, we should be getting answers just in the next few minutes from the NYPD. The big question is, what was the motive in all of this? Certainly a frantic morning, a frightening moment for so many as they see this van striking a number of people, according to sources throughout the city. As for the motive, that is what so many are waiting to hear. The suspect, according to our sources, is a 62-year-old Weng K. Sor, taken into custody at this point. Massive police response, Adam. We are going to stay here throughout the afternoon, and again, we will be listening in just a few moments here with the NYPD as they provide an update. We'll send things back to you in the studio.
Okay, and we'll bring that to everyone live here on News 4. Adam, thank you so much. You mentioned the multiple crime scenes. One of them is in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. That's where we find News 4's Paisley Chang with the latest on that scene. Paisley, what can you tell us?
Adam, a terrifying morning from people in Bay Ridge here to Sunset Park. We are at one of the locations where this U-Haul truck driver struck. I'm going to step out of the way. This is 4th Avenue and 55th Street. You can see that police have cordoned off this area. Highway detectives are here taking measurements and pictures, as well as trying to piece this together. But we were able to obtain security video, which shows the truck clearly driving into the bike lane, striking a man on an e-bike or a moped and driving over him. We've frozen the video at that point. The video also goes on to show the truck trying to strike another cyclist, but he luckily got out of the way. Police say the bicyclist is critically injured and at Lutheran Hospital. Now, before he made it to Sunset Park, police say this driver of the U-Haul truck began his rampage in Bay Ridge. There, he struck 3 males on mopeds. Witnesses describe the terror as they watch this U-Haul drive up the sidewalk and into innocent people.
Because he not tried to stop. He stopped because another car was in front of him, and that's what I see.
And you saw the U-Haul truck run over the bicyclist?
Yes. After that, when, we had a chance to take the license plate and give it to the police officer.
Now, about a handful of detectives have just arrived at the scene. This is a very active investigation, and like Adam said, we are all curious about the motive of this driver. These witnesses that told us it was terrifying to watch because it seemed like he was deliberately trying to find people to hit with the truck, driving up the sidewalk at one point. And of course, everyone here is trying to understand why he would want to do that. We are live in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. Paisley Chang, News 4 New York.
Yeah, a lot of questions about that, Paisley. Thank you. In that video, so difficult to watch where you see the truck run over that man. The guy allegedly behind the wheel of the U-Haul, we're getting more information about him as we speak. Chief investigative reporter Jonathan Deans tells us he has a history with police. What can you tell us about this potential suspect here?
Well, Weng K. Sor is his name. We're told he's 62 years old, born in 1960, and that dating to 2019, he's had at least one call about him to the police regarding an emotionally disturbed person. There may be additional calls as well. He also may have had a speeding infraction in that vehicle within the last week. All that paperwork is still being reviewed, but that's the preliminary information that police are working off of. Emotionally disturbed person is the leading theory, according to 3 law enforcement officials who we've spoken with. Again, what he was doing in that van, whether he was living in that van or what he was using it for, unclear. The bomb squad was called in and did do a complete search of the van, of the vehicle, as a precaution. Nothing found inside that U-Haul that was of added concern. Obviously, the U-Haul striking 4 people, one of them critically injured in the hospital at this time, and the investigation very much ongoing. We are hearing that the suspect, Mr. Soar, may have been in New York just since 2018, 2019, and that he may have a previous address in Las Vegas. Police are working on that background information about him as well. All this happens to be taking place while in federal court in Lower Manhattan, there is a terrorism trial going on where a driver convicted for driving along the West Side Highway and mowing down bicyclists several years ago. There does not appear to be any linkage. It's coincidental. That is the leading information we have right now. And again, this appears to be the actions of an emotionally disturbed person, that according to law enforcement officials we've spoken with. But again, as for any specific motive, that investigation very much ongoing.
Quite a coincidence there for sure, Jonathan. Here as prosecutors now seek the death penalty for Sayfullo Saipov, who used also a U-Haul truck to mow those pedestrians down on the west side in 2017. A question for you about how this may have all began. What do we know? What are you hearing from your law enforcement sources about how this may have started, all the mayhem that unfolded this morning here in Brooklyn?
I believe it was the initial traffic accident on Fifth Avenue, and that resulted in police then trying to find and follow that vehicle. Then there was the second incident where along Fourth Avenue, where additional pedestrians were hit, and then the chase continued, and they eventually brought that van to a stop, as you were describing and as Adam was describing, pinned against a wall by police vehicles and surrounded. The suspect taken into custody almost immediately after that vehicle was stopped around 11:30, 11:45 this morning. He is in custody at the 68th precinct being questioned at this time. And again, top police officials expected to hold a briefing shortly about this. We're waiting to hear to see if federal law enforcement is going to assist in any way. Usually in cases like this, an FBI agent, ATF officials are sent out as a precaution just to get briefed. But right now, this appears to be a local NYPD-led investigation at this time. Okay, Chief Investigative Reporter Jonathan Dienst joining us here. Thank you for the information, Jonathan. Let's take a look now at that police news conference Jonathan just mentioned. We're going to bring you live updates. We'll let you hear from law enforcement and from the NYPD as soon as that news conference begins. Right now, let's go back, though, to News 4's Paisley Chang, who brought us that startling, difficult to watch video, Paisley, where you see the U-Haul truck on the sidewalk and it runs over what appears to be a man on a bike or a moped, maybe a delivery person. What have you learned about what we're seeing in this video, Paisley?
Yes, Adam, you know, it's hard to believe that this was not deliberate. You could see him drive into the bike lane, strike the man, and then literally drive over him. And then the video goes on to show the truck drive onto the sidewalk again to try to strike another bicyclist who's in front of him. This entire scene was so terrifying for the people who witnessed it. This is a very busy street, and it's also very nice outside. A lot of people hanging out outside, walking on the sidewalk, and that is what they saw this morning. I'd like to show you the scene right here, though, on 4th Avenue and 55th Street. It appears, Adam, that this is the last place that the U-Haul truck driver struck. And you'll see there are a lot of detectives here right now, members of the Highway Crime Scene Investigation Unit. They are taking pictures, taking measurements of this crime scene over here. They've only blocked off this side of the road, but left the road, you know, the opposite side of the road going. So you'll see there are cars in the way, so you might not be able to see it clearly at some point. But the investigation is ongoing here. As we spoke to witnesses, they did say that it was very hard to believe that this was anything but intentional, based on the way that the truck was angling for pedestrians and bicyclists and driving up onto the bike lanes as well as the sidewalk. You know, people here feel fortunate for some of the bicyclists because they were able to ride out of the way. They were able to get out of the way of this truck. They saw the truck stop for a brief moment, possibly because there was a red light. We have some video of that, too, that we'll be able to share. But eventually, this driver then continues forward on 4th Avenue. And something that everyone noticed was how fast and recklessly this truck driver was going. And from what we know now, he was headed towards Red Hook, which is where he ultimately ended up, where this police press conference is expected to take place. But yeah, very terrifying morning here in Sunset Park, and a lot of people really questioning what was the motive here and why he would do such a thing. Back to you, Adam.
Oh, yeah, certainly a lot of questions. Paisley Cheng there for us live in Sunset Park. As we await this news conference from the NYPD, Chief Investigative Reporter Jonathan Dienst has been very clear about one thing: no threat to the public at this point. The mayor has said that, which is an important note. But I do have a question just to clarify something that you brought up earlier, Jonathan, that you mentioned this all began with a traffic stop. There was some sort of crash or accident. Do we know if police responded to that first crash, or if they had possibly tried to pull over this U-Haul truck and then evading police, there was a crash following? Do you know if there's any distinction there?
We have heard both accounts, but the latest account and the clearest account we have is that first was the accident, and then police began the pursuit and the hunt for this vehicle. But there were some earlier on reports that perhaps there was a possible traffic stop. I believe some of that information may be confusing because, again, this vehicle was pulled over in the last week for a speeding infraction. That is the information we have. So the best play-by-play would be accident. Police begin to give chase as this vehicle is driving erratically, driving up onto sidewalks, as Paisley was describing the terrible details of how folks on the sidewalks and bike lanes were hit until he gets pulled over and stopped. Again, the suspect is 62 years old. He is in custody in the 68th precinct. He has at least one past call about emotionally disturbed issues, a call about him. That dates to about 2019. There may be others we're waiting to hear, and that he may have some ties to Las Vegas previously. Again, what he was doing with that truck, believed to have been in that truck for at least a week, given the previous speeding infraction. But again, police are piecing it all together, and we expect to hear much more about this suspect during the briefing, which is expected to start shortly.
And Chopper 4, right now you're looking at pictures over where the U-Haul was finally stopped, the driver taken into custody there in Red Hook, just outside the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. And here's a look now from the ground at the U-Haul. Jonathan, we know that when it first broke, that police, as a precaution, had the bomb squad come out. That sweep was clean and clear. And do we know if the driver was taken without incident, or was there any sort of struggle at the time?
The only thing I've heard about the arrest, which apparently went smoothly after the vehicle was stopped, was that the driver may have been making some sort of statements about how he wanted to die, how he was upset, and comments along those lines when he was taken into custody. And then from that scene where the truck was stopped, he was taken to the 68th precinct, where he is being questioned and continues to be questioned at this time. And as police continue to pore over his background with the past traffic violations, with past possible emotional issues that were raised, and of course tracking his past whereabouts, as we're hearing there may be a Las Vegas previous residence before he came here to New York in about 2018, 2019. We're still waiting on some clarity, so all of this is preliminary, of course. But again, they do believe lone actor, if you will, and that he is in custody, and that there was nothing hazardous found inside that vehicle after a preliminary search by the bomb squad.
Okay, really helpful information. All of this, of course, unfolding just within the last 2 hours, Jonathan, which is helpful to explain to people why so much information, new information, continues to pour in. In fact, we just learned from City Council member Justin Brannon, who represents Sunset Park and Bay Ridge, that all of the victims are currently being treated at NYU Langone in Brooklyn, and he thanks the team there for taking care of those victims. At this point, we still believe at least 4 victims and 1 in critical condition, correct, Jonathan?
That's right. I believe the total number is 4 hit, and 1 of those 4 is in critical condition. Again, it appears like 3 folks on mopeds, bikes, were hit first, and then there was a second incident, and that was where the most seriously injured person was hit. That was on about 5th Avenue, and that person is a male Asian in his 30s and is in critical condition as of the latest update that we had heard.
Okay, Jonathan Dienst, our chief investigative reporter, very helpful there. Thank you. We're going to turn now to former NYPD chief of department Terrence Monahan for some more perspective on this. And Terry, we appreciate your insight as always. When you first hear about this incident, a U-Haul truck, at least 4 people mowed down here on a Monday morning. What were your first thoughts?
Obviously, the first thing you're thinking is this terror related. What's going on? What's the motivation behind it? From what we're hearing at this point in time, though, it appears that the individual involved was emotionally disturbed. He had some sort of history in the past of emotional problems. So it has tampered down a bit. But as it's going on, that's the first thing on everyone's mind. Is this terror related? Is there something more to it?
And while that might serve as some relief, of course, that there's no threat to the public right now, absolutely that matters. It also is concerning when you see that surveillance video, Terry, and you see the way the U-Haul recklessly is driving on the sidewalk. What does that tell authorities about the potential, what's going through that suspect's mind or potential motive here?
Listen, we all saw what happened on the West Side Highway a few years back. That's the first thing you're thinking. My God, what is this guy going to do, and how can we stop him before he can cause more carnage? So that is what the cop perspective is. How can we stop him? How can we pin him? They did a tremendous job, from what I'm seeing, getting him before he could get into the tunnel, before he could get into Manhattan and maybe drive on some of those streets. There's a relief. The moment that you have him, he's in custody. Obviously, you get the bomb squad there right away to give a quick search of that vehicle, make sure there's nothing else that could cause harm. So it goes from a real state of fear to quickly being tampered down once you have them in custody, and you can see that the threat is now over.
Yeah, big relief there for the public, certainly in those areas in Brooklyn. And like you mentioned, this driver was taken into custody as we look at the Chopper 4 scene here, right outside of the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel there in Red Hook. And Paisley mentioned something too, Terry, that's interesting. It's a beautiful February morning, a warm day. Could have been a lot of people outside. This certainly could have been a lot worse.
Absolutely. And listen, if he gets into Manhattan, too, with the amount of people probably walking on the streets, you know, unusually warm weather, you know, thank God that it was a tremendous response, as usual, by the NYPD, and got this under control as quickly as they did. You know, let's remember those that got injured and the one that's critical, but it could have been a heck of a lot worse.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Okay, Terrence Monahan, former NYPD chief of department and WNBC News 4 New York contributor. We thank you, Terry. Let's go back to News 4's. Yeah, absolutely. We go to News 4's Paisley Chang in Sunset Park at one of the different incident sites there of this a violent rampage this Monday morning. But Paisley, what are you hearing from people on the ground about the witnesses and how they interpreted all this unfolding this morning?
Well, Adam, you know, from what we have seen from people we've spoken to, but also the security video we were obtained, it is very difficult to believe that this truck driver did not do this on purpose. In the video, you could see him purposely turning into the bike lane. He strikes the bicyclist and then drives over him. And then it looks like he's pursuing the bicyclist in front of him at a high rate of speed. And, you know, we did ask witnesses, like, well, did you think this might have been accidental? And they said no, because he never stopped. And in fact, after he struck that person, he tried to strike several more people here along 4th Avenue in Sunset Park. And so the video really gives us a very clear picture of what happened here. Now, the bicyclist that was struck first and, you know, run over by this U-Haul truck was sent to Lutheran Hospital. He is in critical condition. We are told that his condition is quite serious. And back here on 4th Avenue and 55th Street, you know, this is a very busy intersection. This is a grocery store, right, where a lot of people might have been coming here to get their coffee, their breakfast. There is a e-bike repair store down here, a law office, a cell phone store. And, you know, not to forget, it is a gorgeous day today. So a lot of pedestrians out here, a lot of people out on their bikes. You were saying before how this could have been much worse had he been able to strike anybody else over here. And and in fact, he was, he did not. For whatever reason, the video that we have shows him stopped at the light. That's on 54th Street and 4th Avenue. And at some point, he ends up, waits for the light, and then we see him drive, like speed away. He's going so fast, and it looks like he's trying to make a left from 4th Avenue onto one of the streets ahead of us. As we all know, he did end up in Red Hook, where my colleague Adam Harding is, and that is where police were able to stop him. What is not clear is how far police were pursuing him, because we know that at some point in Bay Ridge, it looks like they were following him and trying to stop him. But over here in the videos that we've seen, we did not see any police vehicles behind him, after he did strike the bicyclist here and attempt to strike other cyclists ahead of him. And so, of course, we're waiting for this news conference because we're hoping to get a lot more about this driver's motive. Why did he do this? And why this particular neighborhood, Bay Ridge here and in Sunset Park. Back to you, Adam.
So many questions, PZ. Hopefully we'll get some answers soon as we await this NYPD news conference. And you mentioned that awareness, anybody walking in the city, you always have to be aware of your surroundings. But in that video you showed us, there's no way that driver, the bike rider in the bike lane is ever going to notice that truck coming from behind. Even if you are totally paying attention and aware of your surroundings, he didn't stand a chance, that poor guy, because he came from behind.
Yeah, you're so right. He comes from behind, and you're this is what you're used to living in New York City. You take for granted the fact that this bike lane is reserved for you to safely ride your bicycle or your e-bike, and you take that for granted, I guess. But that's something you just come to expect. It's like the rules of the road. This U-Haul truck comes from behind him, strikes him very quickly, runs over him, and because of what happened, the cyclist in front of him and then another cyclists down the street from him were wise enough to figure out what was going on and ride out of their way. They rode closer to the sidewalk, but it is very jarring to watch this video and to see what this truck driver was attempting to do.
Yeah, it's really upsetting. Okay, Pei Chang with the latest for us there in Sunset Park. And now, as we await this NYPD news conference, let's check back in with Chief Investigative Reporter Jonathan Deans, because we're still trying to get some questions answered about a potential motive here. But one thing that Pei brought up, do we have any indication if any of the people who were hit by the truck were targeted or if this was random?
Too soon to know, but my suspicion based on the TikTok is that this is random. But again, unclear. We're waiting to hear from police about that. Again, this suspect, Wang Soor, has some history of mental issues, according to numerous police officials. And they're also trying to learn a lot more about that U-Haul truck that was used. It has an Arizona plate, but we're told that they're looking into whether it was recently rented out of Florida and whether this Wang Soor drove it up from Florida and got that speeding ticket on his way north from Florida to New York in that vehicle. This is all very preliminary, all being pieced together as we speak, and that is in part where this investigation is going. Where did he get this truck? Did he drive it up from Florida? Did he get a speeding ticket en route? It may have been rented back on February 1st, so that would indicate that he's had it for, 10 days, 2 weeks or so, as this investigation is ongoing. But again, Wang Soor, 62 years old, is in custody at the 68th precinct, and again, a history of emotional issues, but the investigation very much underway into why he decided to target some bikers, some motorists on the sidewalks, on the bike paths in Brooklyn this morning.
Okay, Jonathan, let's reset for everyone if anyone's just joining us here, because it is a confusing, multi-dimensional crime scene this morning in Brooklyn. At least 4 people mowed down by the driver in a U-Haul in Brooklyn, starting in Bay Ridge at around 11 a.m., goes through Sunset Park, and then eventually, after being chased by police, taken into custody in Red Hook, just outside the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. And Chopper 4 over that scene when it finally finished just around 11:30, when that driver was taken into custody. Jonathan mentioned the driver, Wang Soor, who is now in custody. There's no threat to the public. And now we are getting surveillance videos. Oh, here's actually a photo of the suspect. This is the first time we're getting a look at that suspect, 62-year-old Weng Soor. As we take a closer look, Jonathan mentioned the connections to Las Vegas. We see the Nevada stamp on that photo there. And the U-Haul that he was driving in. Still questions about the motive and what brought him to this part of Brooklyn. But Jonathan, just again to reset for everyone, do we know about ties to the neighborhood with this suspect at all, or what may have brought him to New York?
I don't know much about his ties. I just know that there is some sort of, again, ties to New York dating to 2018, 2019, where there's this past emotionally disturbed person report. That's the best I've got in terms of New York ties. As you've seen by the photo we've obtained of the suspect, it does appear to show that he has the ties to Nevada, as law enforcement sources had suggested to us earlier. And now the question is, where did he rent that U-Haul from? Again, there's a leading belief now that it was rented out of Florida, dating to February 1st, and that he drove up from Florida to New York in that vehicle. He may have been living in that vehicle. He may have gotten a speeding ticket in that vehicle in the last week. And that, again, there was then this rampage, this incident this morning at a couple of locations where 4 people are injured, 1 critically, as the driver allegedly drove and hit several of those victims, 1 again in critical condition. Again, Weng Soor is the suspect. We have his photo. He is now in custody, according to 2 senior law enforcement officials who say they are exploring what charges to file, and they're trying to get to a motive. Again, the leading theory at this time, a person with a history of emotional issues.
Okay, and as we await this NYPD news conference, just one last thought, Jonathan, is we're going to bring that to you live when it happens. But of course, the news conference originally scheduled for 1 o'clock. It's almost 1:30. But the police, just as we're getting new information every moment, the police have a lot to sort through here. And I'd imagine from your experience right now, they are trying to make sure that they have the most up-to-date, specific information before they go out there in the event that people have a lot of questions that are going to be unanswered right now.
Absolutely, and this is why when we do this reporting, we always say this information is preliminary. We often get the general gist correct, and there will be a detail or 2 that changes as the investigation goes on. We're giving the best available information as we're getting it and sharing it with you. But again, this is all preliminary, and it can and will likely change as the investigation proceeds. But yes, expect the top NYPD officials to come out and provide a briefing with the best information they have at this time. Again, this is just a couple of hours old. So there's still much work to be done in this investigation.
Okay, Chief Investigative Reporter Jonathan Dienst with so much valuable information about an awful morning in Brooklyn where a U-Haul driver plowed through 4 pedestrians, including at least 1 person on a moped. That person in critical condition. We see the surveillance video of that unfolding right here in Brooklyn. And this mayhem goes through Bay Ridge to Sunset Park, and eventually police take that driver into custody without incident in Red Hook. That driver is 62-year-old Weng Soor, as Jonathan Dienst told us. The leading theory right now is that he may have been emotionally distressed and has some sort of history with police. We're still waiting for the NYPD news conference. As soon as that happens, we'll bring it to you live right here on News 4. But in the meantime, you can always get the latest information on NBCNewYork.com and all of our streaming platforms and the News 4 app. Thanks for watching.